When you think about it, remakes are actually really weird. You need to have quite a hefty amount of faith that a combination of nostalgia and genuine quality is enough to sell a game. It may sound as simple as, hey, let's make this game look nice, but if there isn't much of a demand, then you're wasting your time in more ways than one. Takes me back to Flashback. A botched remake of a game not a lot of people cared for, and you play it and just, who was this made for? In recent times, Pokemon has been one of the most consistent franchises for remakes, to the point where their announcements aren't really a surprise anymore. So this video is less about what should be kept and ditched if Game Freak remake Gen 4, and more like, it's coming, prepare yourself. Question is, when, really? For a little while there was a pattern. The Gen 1 remake came out during Gen 3, the Gen 2 remake came out during Gen 4, but then nothing. Nothing but empty silence. Though, hey, let's think about this. Gen 1 and 2 were both 8-bit video games, and the gap between them and the games that came after was big enough to pump out remakes pretty briskly. By the time you reach Gen 3 and the prospect of giving that a new coat of paint, not so much could have been done by remaking it in the style of Gen 5. You know, it would have been nice, but this is better. Which brings us back to Gen 4. Is there enough of a technology gap between Gen 4 and 7 that we can expect a remake in the style of Sun and Moon? Might not look like a lot has changed, but graphically it looks a lot less cartoony, and Sun and Moon have already shown off their ridiculous array of features, so maybe there's something to play with here. Should it come out next year, it would be 10 years since the original, so that'd be pretty suitable. Or maybe they'll wait until 2019, since that's the kind of time gap we've had between each remake. The prospect of a Gen 7 remake for Diamond and Pearl would mean that there would be 3 distinct sets of Pokemon games on the 3DS, which could well be seen as excessive. Especially since you can still pop in a DS cartridge of these games and play it on that console. Still, better here than mobile gaming. Still not convinced on that yet. And then after I started this script, the Nintendo Switch was shown off as this very impressive handheld come home console machine of wonderment, so maybe it could go on this. A remake on a main console? Weirder things have happened. It's easy to get excited for remakes, but it's worth thinking about these potential games from a series progression standpoint. You can think about how all these funky features would look in 3D, but you have to wonder if there's anything that needs fixing in the remakes. At least stuff that can be reworked, nothing like fixing terrible Pokemon. Makes you wonder why Nintendo remakes Pokemon games. With Fire Red and Leaf Green, it was because there was no link between GBA and Game Boy games. Ditto with Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but with DS games. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came about because of a massive demand from fans, where the idea of Sinnoh Confirmed almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy. This is probably just me, but I think of my fondest memories of Sinnoh, and there's honestly not that many. There's some great moments with the Elite Four and Team Galactic being crazy bastards, but for me at least, it isn't as memorable as other gens. So if Nintendo announced tomorrow that they were remaking Diamond and Pearl, would I be excited? Honestly, not as much as previous remakes. Would Nintendo have much to gain from remaking these games? Sure, lots of money, but it would set a precedence that these remakes have to happen to every Pokemon game, regardless if there's anything that needs fixing. Which may shift the focus away from actually solving problems and just giving it a facelift. It'd be great to see, but only if some good can come from it. Obviously, the Pokemon Company aren't keen on doing anything predictably anymore, but if we assume that Sinnoh remakes are in their plans, there's a whole host of interesting features that would be worth a revisit with a different perspective. Most of which are related to legendary Pokemon. This is a generation where Game Freak decided that 4 or 5 legendaries a generation wasn't enough. Clearly, if you're not knee-deep in important Pokemon, you're doing something wrong. Pretty cool though, enough variety here for everyone to find one to idolize. But this is the generation that introduced a higher power to the world of Pokemon. And yet despite how important Arceus is, catching him is an experience locked behind a mystery gift that was never given out. You can pick him up from various events, but the actual act of catching him? Nope, never happened. They never gave out that magic flute thing. So you give him a Delta episode or something. He's the fucking all-important god of Pokemon creation. You gotta do more with that. Does mean that he'll almost certainly get a Mega Evolution if Game Freak is still keen on that, since you can't have Arceus being upstaged by this guy. In a world of constant power struggles, it would be fitting if Arceus had the most decisive say. And you know what else would be worth a reimagining? Make Cyrus and Team Galactic as menacing as they were in Platinum. They don't get much done in Diamond and Pearl, but that cutscene where Giratina confronts Cyrus in Platinum is, oh, you just forget this is a DS game sometimes. Imagine that in 3D. No, wait, imagine the distortion world and the kind of mind-bending 3D that actually makes me want to use the 3D depth slider for the first time in years. Remember what Oris didn't have? No Battle Frontier. You know what Sinnoh did have? Goddamn Battle Frontier, son! It's been too long, give us a post-game that you can really put work towards for a significant time after the credits roll. Game Freak has already caught on that people like hatching eggs en masse to get the best IVs, natures, the chance at a shiny Pokemon, and took steps towards making it easier with the battle resort. But the actual battling itself could have been a lot better. The Battle Frontier from Platinum was way more detailed and fun to play through, so more of that please. I mentioned Mega Revolutions earlier, but if they end up being Gen 7 games, then they'll probably just use the Z moves that Sun and Moon are so excited about. I doubt we'd get regional variants like the Alolan form since Sinnoh is based off Japan, although Kunoshia Island, which is what Victory Road is based off of, is disputed territory between Russia and Japan. Might be a bit of a stretch there. If Mega Revolutions aren't really continued, then why not Primal Evolutions? Maybe just a thing for Oras, but Mystery Dungeon players will know that Primal Dialga is already a thing. Got really good theme music and everything. Maybe we could have both. The prospect of facing up against Cynthia and her Mega Garchomp. Yeah, that's terrifying. If you're gonna remake these games, give me a challenge. At least, more so than usual. So I guess I'll go back to what I said at the start. Ultimately, I don't think there's anything that will stop Diamond and Pearl from being remade. It's just a question of when and what they will look like. Personally, the idea doesn't excite me as much as a new Pokemon game, like the one coming out in a couple of days. Another week for Europeans, gonna be a long week. But if the remakes sell as well as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, then Nintendo, Game Freak, the Pokemon Company, they'll all feel vindicated. I remember these games playing quite slowly and there being at least two routes that I'd rather punch a chicken than go through, but that's really the whole point of remaking or remastering a game. It's the perfect opportunity to paper up some cracks and reimagine the game with more powerful hardware. Just so long as improvements and additions are actually implemented, it could provide die-hard fans of a new game that feels very similar while also something new, and could also provide players who missed Diamond and Pearl the first time around with the quintessential Sinnoh experience. Of course, this is all ridiculously hypothetical and hopefully we won't hear anything about it for a couple of years. Will that stop people from finding the smallest detail in Sun and Moon and assuming it means that Sinnoh is confirmed? No, but I thought I might as well make camp early. This is my land, go get your own.